Hello, I'm Violet Manners, and welcome to Hidden Heritage, the podcast that brings you inside Great Britain's favourite destinations, with help from custodians, historians, artisans, and experts. This week on the podcast, we're diving into one of the UK's most fascinating, notorious, and spine-chilling destinations, the Hellfire Caves in West Wickham. The Hellfire Caves began its existence as a gentleman's club and meeting point for some of the world's most powerful people in the 18th century. It soon grew an infamous reputation for decadence and debauchery. And the caves survive today as a monument to the club, continuing to capture the imagination of thousands of visitors a year. Joining me to discuss them further is Victoria Dashwood Chase, director of Hellfire Caves, and she grew up at West Wickham. In the episode, Victoria and I explore the Hellfire Caves' infamous past, from its deep association with the occult to its connection with the paranormal. We also will discuss how the Hellfire Caves has evolved over the years to become a thriving tourist destination today. Victoria opens up about the challenges of preserving a site like the Hellfire Caves. Victoria reveals what exciting plans they have for the caves in the future. But before that, let's get to know our guest a bit better. Victoria, do you mind if I call you Tor?
No, I don't mind.
So Tor, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. Can we just start by you telling us a little bit more about you and how you're related to the Hellfire Caves?
So my ancestor, Sir Francis Dashwood, he was actually the second Sir Francis Dashwood, built the caves in the 18th century. And then it was closed for pretty much, when he died, it closed for 200 years. And then my grandfather, Sir Francis Dashwood, in the 1950s, got really inspired by a holiday to New Mexico where he saw some caves, came back and decided to open the caves himself. And now I work for the family business, which involves the caves. And I'm particularly interested in the experiential and the event side of it because, you know, now it's a tourist attraction. It just offers so much opportunity.
So true. And let's just start. So you've given us a general overview of the caves, but where actually is West Wickham and the Hellfire Caves?
Yeah, so West Wickham is just under an hour from London towards Oxfordshire, in the Chilterns. And the caves is in West Wickham and essentially is built into the Chiltern Hills. So you kind of enter through this Gothic opening in the side of the hills, and then you walk down the caves. When you're at the very bottom, you're 100 metres underground from Earth, if that makes sense. So pretty amazing. And it kind of goes down a cross-section of the hillside. Halfway down, you have the banqueting hall. Again, it's just amazing. So you're completely underground and it's 60, 70 feet high, like a dome-shaped room that fits about 100 for a dinner.
Amazing.
So you see that and then you kind of weave your way down the caverns and you get to the very bottom where you cross the River Styx and it's meant to symbolise crossing the into the underworld, which
Amazing.
is then the inner temple. And the inner temple is actually where they met for the Hellfire Club. That's where they held their meetings.
Okay. For our listeners, it's about 40 minutes basically from London, which is unbelievable.
London, exactly.
So sort of as a place to come visit outside of London, to get outside and enjoy a day actually seeing the Hellfire Caves. So just take us back. So we're going to start in the past. And when were the Hellfire Caves first built and who were they built by and why? You gave us a little insight into it.
Yeah, so 1740s. So they were built by Sir Francis. Technically, like the main reason was to build a road between West Wickham and High Wycombe and to provide employment after, I think, 2 really bad harvests. But obviously, if you just want to build a road, make employment, you would just dig a chalk cavern. You wouldn't necessarily make it so intricate. So there's obviously other things at play there. Mm-hmm. At the opportune time, so they'd already started the Hellfire Club.
And this is in what period of time?
18th century. 1746, the Hellfire Club started. Mm-hmm. They were meeting in Medmenham Abbey, which burnt down. And so as the caves was finished, it came at the opportune time for him to move their meetings to this inner temple of the caves. Like I said before, it was closed then for 200 years when he died. And then my grandfather in the 1950s wanted to open it again. He went to his dad. I think he looked it up or found out it cost £5,000 to make it safe, which is equivalent of like £250,000 now. So a lot of money. Mm. Went to his father to ask for if he could do it. And he said, what a damn silly idea. Absolutely not. Yeah. But he did lease it to him for £1 a year. So then he started rebuilding it. And we've got the photos. Like he did a lot of it himself. A lot of it was really dangerous. So by 1951, they'd opened the first section, and apparently you'd arrive and you get a candle, and then that was part of you'd pay and you get given a candle and you'd go down, which is now thinking about it, terrifying.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
Can you just describe the layout and design of the caves? Because I'm lucky enough to have been in the caves and seen them for myself in a very special context, which we'll come to at some point. But what does it look like, and what are you actually walking through? So
it's chalk. So the children's is chalk. So you're walking through kind of chalk weaving alleyways with little caverns on the outside, but it's slightly drippy and it's gravel on the floor, and you feel it is very, very cave-like. There's nothing man-made. There's nothing apart from the caves down there, if that makes sense. And then you open up into this big, like I said before, banqueting hall. So you can imagine that at the time, so when Grandpa was rebuilding it, apparently there were boulders the whole way down, so they had to move those out. In order to get in, excavate and do the work. And they did it. They only could do the first section in the 1950s, and then it took until 1971 to figure out how to get that banqueting hall safe. At one point they built a trench on the outside, and that was used for a number of years, so they could get the whole way to the bottom without using the banqueting hall. But obviously architecturally, people they improved and their knowledge improved, and it became more cost effective to do it. So they managed to get down, and 1971 as such it was completed, and then I think he built the cafe in the 1990s.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, they would not get planning for the caves now.
I know.
That's why it's so cool that it's still there, and it does feel so safe when you're walking through it.
Well, yeah, exactly. And my dad's been brilliant. He did, in the lockdown, it was closed. So obviously we weren't allowed to open. So we built trenches the whole way down it and rewired all the lighting. There's now Wi-Fi the whole way down. And then in recent years, the inner temple was always closed. And in recent years, that's been now made safe to go in. So in a modern way, you can, I guess there's no further you can go in terms of what you can see in terms of the building, but you can go further in terms of how you can experience it.
Yeah. And so going back to Sir Francis Dashwood.
Yes, the first one.
The first one, sorry.
So the second one, but the interesting one.
The interesting one. So when did the caves first become associated with nobility and the famous sort of happenings that went on down there?
Exactly. So he built it for the the employment and the road, but actually the Hellfire Club is the major and famous part of why it was built. And to give it a bit of an insight into his personality, I think it's definitely got a status symbol element to it. He's got all his political rivals nearby, Lord Buckingham in Stowe, and probably they built a lovely temple, and he thinks, what can I build to up them, if that makes sense?
Because just give us context, and who was Sir Francis Dashwood?
So Sir Francis, his father was the Premier Baronet, and he was Lord Despencer. And Postmaster General. Benjamin Franklin was his second when he was Postmaster General. But he built the house. He was very eccentric, and his father was the one that had been very successful, and he was doing in those days, I don't think the nobility worked. So he was travelling the world on his grand tours and went to Italy, Greece and Constantinople, and that's where a lot of the ideas came for the caves.
Yeah.
So at the house, in the garden, there's a lake, and he apparently used to have frigate ships on the lake and have mock battles after lunch. And in recent years, the cannons and the cannonballs were found in very dry summers left over from that.
In the lake.
So that kind of describes the personality. Yeah. So the Hellfire Club, because that's obviously what everyone is interested in about the caves. Sir Francis was a bon vivant, and I think he had already 2 previous drinking and dining clubs before the Hellfire Club. So there was the Society of Dilettantes, which was supposedly a club for the appreciation of classical art, but actually was much more dissolute. And Horace Walpole famously said something on the lines of, to be able to be in the club, you had to have visited Italy, but actually it was to do with being drunk.
Oh.
So I think, and then his second club was the Divan Club, and that was for the appreciation of the Ottoman and Constantinople. Wow. And then in 1746, he started the Hellfire Club.
Such a good name.
And I think famously, I think it's famous for blasphemous religious rituals and bacchanalian orgies.
Oh my
kind of like
Lord.
Killing kittens of the 18th century.
Yeah. Well, everything does go in cycles. So, that was, I guess this is like the original founding fathers of it. But it's such a good name, Hellfire, as well. And how did Sir Francis become? So he was sort of part of society in this sort of mid 1700s, and then he built the Hellfire Club. The caves were there and in existence, but he sort of resurrected them. How did it become kind of synonymous with the nobility and aristocrats?
Exactly. Well, I think that the members of the club were all predominantly political figures, and it was whilst they were having these supposedly bacchanalian orgies, I think there was also a lot of talk of politics and things, important decisions being made down there. So Lord Sandwich was famously in it, and then Benjamin Franklin was a guest, and he wrote very favourably of Sir Francis, about his great hospitality. I think, and now, in present times, it means that there's a huge interest from America, which I think is really nice and interesting because of that link with Benjamin Franklin.
Interesting. And I guess, I mean, I know, it's definitely true of my, my family history and some of the familial stories that get handed down. So do you have any favourite stories that that have been sort of passed on to you about like the Hellfire Caves and kind of what really did go on down there?
I mean, we were talking about this earlier. It's hard to know what's true and what's not true. There are so many stories, but I think the fun ones are the ghosts, about the ghosts.
So just tell us some of those.
So one of the ghosts, and I think this one is true, is because I checked with my father earlier, which are the true ones, which are not, is about Paul Whitehead. So Paul Whitehead was steward of the Hellfire Club, so kind of like secretary. And he, when he died, gave his heart as a gift to Sir Francis. And Sir Francis put his heart in a urn and then put that in the centre of the mausoleum, which is the mausoleum beautiful and sits on top of the hill right above the caves. And then supposedly some Australian tourists stole his heart. And so now Paul Whitehead's heart and ghosts and spirits are kind of haunting the caves in anger, if that makes sense.
His heart was taken away from something he loved.
In the 70s, so much later on, a lady came as one of the early tourists and believed she got assailed by the spirits of Sir Francis, and she left the caves a nymphomaniac, and she tried to get the cave shut down because she believed the caves had affected her in a way that it wasn't her fault, and she was this nymphomaniac.
Oh my God, that is so funny. That's fascinating. It sounds like it's the second Sir Francis that did all of the restoration bit by bit to sort of restore it and the temple and resurrect the temple, and then your father's gone on and done similar in COVID. But the restoration of somewhere like the Hellfire Caves being lost is a real one at times, I imagine, and has been in your lifetime in the past that you can remember, presumably.
Yeah, but I think that there's I don't think there's necessarily been a time when it's been at threat, if that makes sense, because there was a phase when it was just not known.
For 200 years.
For 200 years, and then tourism has now really changed these historical, hence your this whole podcast.
Yeah.
So I think going forwards from then, there's not really been, it's always been popular. It's affordable and it's a family outing. So it's a brilliant, and it's close to London, it's close to lots of cities. So it's a really nice day out as such for people to do. So it's popular.
I just find it fascinating because I was lucky to have your wedding, actually, the after party happened in the caves, and I remember going down those chalk caves, and it takes about 10-15 minutes to get to the bottom of the caves.
We didn't even go to the bottom. So for our wedding, so we had exactly like you said, we had our wedding down there because we love it. But we shut it half because we thought we'd lose everybody if we had everyone going the whole way down. We thought we'd have
I did not know that.
Lost bodies.
Because we were in that dome, and what is that dome room called?
That's the banqueting hall.
Okay,
Exactly.
So the banqueting hall really is quite extraordinary, and you managed to get an enormous sort of DJ set down there. But it's the way it holds the sound and the way that it kind of, you feel like you are literally in the belly of the earth when you're down there.
Totally, and we've done really interesting things down there. There's been like candlelit concerts. We tried doing movie nights, which were really fun, but it's just so much kit to get down to do. But so we're always up for trying fun things. And to really, to get beyond the banqueting hall, it's 15 minutes to get to the bottom. It's double the, that's halfway.
That's scary. That's actually scary. How often did the Hellfire Club happen, and how frequently did they meet down there?
I think they were meeting regularly. Yeah,
really?
So it was today's. Well, I guess we've kind of passed gentlemen's clubs today now, but it's as close to a gentleman's club as you would have had then.
And I just love the idea that they were below ground. There was no one that could disturb them.
No one that could tell them off.
No one that could tell them off, and they were just able to get up to whatever they wanted to and discuss important things of the day. So cool. There's probably some amazing stories that may or may not be true. Lots of rumours about the Hellfire Caves and the Hellfire Club. So just tell us a few of your sort of favourite rumours about the Hellfire Club.
Well, I think they were all clearly very eccentric and mischievous. And there's one story about John Wilkes. Sir Francis helped him dress up as a baboon, and then they let him loose in the Vatican, and then he jumped on Lord Sandwich or something. There's this... the whole, I don't know exactly.
And John Wilkes presumably was also in
John
government.
Wilkes was also in government at the time, yes.
Okay. I mean...
and you just think, what were they really up to?
That is mad. Also just this, that's crazy, but what fun.
Yeah.
And
I think that just gives you an insight.
Oh my gosh. And it was just crazy to think they're sort of down in the caves, hatching these ideas.
I mean, it's a different world from where we are today. They just had so much power / authority. I think that they were clearly like very extravagant, very eccentric.
Yeah.
And just getting away with what they could, probably.
Yeah. And also not afraid to sort of flex their views on, being antichrist and how they disrupt.
But it's interesting that it's all kind of very important, respected figures. I think Sir Francis was well known as being extravagant, but Benjamin Franklin, for example, you maybe didn't know the side of it.
What is the historical significance of the Hellfire Caves to the UK?
Well, so I guess the caves, the house, the temples, all of it together, Sir Francis' building was very ahead of its time. The Palladian style and obviously the caves is Gothic, but the Palladian style of the house, it was very, from his tour, because he was so exposed to these grand tours so young. So I think that's what makes it historically important. And then particularly with the caves, the link to Benjamin Franklin. So, him being, I guess, a member of the Hellfire Club and such a great friend of Sir Francis means there's this tie to America and this history linked to America, which makes which improves and helps the UK as such with visitors. We get lots of visitors from the US.
I bet
coming to see.
Because how big was actually the Hellfire Club? I can't, do you have an idea of how many people there were?
When he originally started it, I think that when he originally started it was called the Knights of St. Francis. Quite self-involved name.
Yeah.
And there was 12 of them.
Okay. And then it sort of expanded from
yes,
that. Okay,
exactly.
Okay. Founding members and then future members.
And I think also it's, historically, British culture can be quite prim and proper, and actually... if you want to get kids involved, if you want to get families involved, the caves is really fun and it's really interesting and it's really different. It's underground cavern of maze of caves because of this family important. So important for families. We're currently going to redo all the signs and make them more interactive and make a specific bit for kids. That's like a game plan at the moment. For them, it's learning and it's interesting.
And actually, it was the other side of life. It was the other side of
totally what goes on behind closed doors.
Yeah.
Sadly, what I think the only women were maybe paid for. Sadly, no wives, but. I think it was, exactly what it's really, really interesting, and how the political elite behaved in their free time, and what was acceptable.
Thank you so much. That's so interesting to learn about the kind of history of Hellfire, just for everyone to kind of contextualize it. The caves and the club. Now let's move on to the present day, because the Hellfire kind of club deceased at some point in time. I don't know when it technically did decease.
Stranger Things use it now. I actually must admit I haven't ever watched Stranger Things.
Yeah.
But I almost need to watch it to get to the bit. They've taken on the Hellfire Club within Stranger Things, but changed it. But they use it as... So we get a lot of, again, tourists coming asking about Stranger Things. And there is no actual link, but they've obviously evolved it in their...
Okay. I did not know that. I want to watch it now. But now we're going to move on to the sort of present day, because like all of these places that are historic and still, run independently, they really require so much kind of entrepreneurial thinking. And what are some of the highlights for you about visiting the Hellfire Caves now? Your great-grandfather handed the house or the running of it, so should I say, to the National Trust, but it sits on West Wickham's wider estate, which is just extraordinarily beautiful. It's 40 minutes outside of London. What are some of the highlights of, visiting West Wickham, your home, and more broadly, the wider estate and the caves?
Yeah, so we've got the caves, and then obviously we opened the Wall Garden, which is in the old Wall Garden of the house. We've made a really big cafe and restaurant with a kind of 150 seats, and it actually works really well. We thought, will it be competition to the caves? Because obviously we have a cafe at the caves, but actually it's worked so well hand in hand, because it means the caves attracts two audiences, I guess, paranormal, because there's all that side of it, and there's bats and there's ghosts and there's all this to delve out, but also, like I said before, families.
Yes.
And having the wall garden means that now families can really come spend a whole day. They can come to the caves, experience that, walk up to the mausoleum. That's definitely not worth missing out on.
Yes.
And then have a really nice lunch at the wall garden, play on the swings. We've got a soft play too, which is really nice for if they've got really little ones. So it's kind of trying to create this day trip experience for everybody.
As you said, it's like, because kitchen gardens were originally obviously sort of, that was where all food was grown for that estate, to feed the estate, the local community. And now you've kind of reimagined it.
And actually, my dad's dad, Grandpa, had a really good idea. Well, I think someone gave him the idea, but he had a miniature donkey stud there. But then the cafe was in the village. It was kind of separate. And then the manager of the cafe slept with the manager of the donkeys and it all went wrong. But that would have been really good. That was almost ahead of its time. It would be amazing now.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fun.
Because why?
Because of tourists. People would love. We have the sweet little lambs in the field next to the garden, and kids love it. We've got a daughter now as well.
Yes.
So I think it's made us inspired by what experiences you can do for children, and so it does feel very, very like a fun place to come for families.
Yeah, and you've created Clara's Corner, which is like, again, this soft play area, all environmentally made. I mean, tell us a little bit about Clara's Corner as well.
Yeah, so we've done Clara's Corner, which is an indoor soft play for children. It again works well with the caves because sometimes the older children want to go down the caves, but nowadays people are having kids so spread out that they might have a 1-year-old and an 8-year-old and they want to do very different things. And so the soft play is indoors. It's really sustainable. It's all really about nature, but bringing nature indoors. And that kind of just adds to the family feeling that we're trying to create at the Wall Garden.
And I guess, so some of the things that you would say to visitors that are looking to go to the Hellfire Caves, but also like the wider estate, the things they should not miss are the Wall Garden restaurant.
The Wall Garden, I mean, it depends. If they're family, I'd say the Wall Garden, Clara's Corner, the swings and the caves.
Yeah.
And maybe a little walk. Lovely if they could go to Westwickham Park and walk around the gardens, if kids are old enough to do that. But if they're just tourism, and they're not families, the walking is just brilliant. Like, people love the Cotswolds, and Cotswolds are so famous. But I think the Chilterns is sometimes slightly forgotten.
I agree.
And it's just got the most stunning walks, and it's so accessible, like 45 minutes, and you can walk for hours and hours, and it's completely unspoilt. But then 2 minutes, you're into lovely Marlow and go have some lunch. There's so much to do.
There's so much to do around that. I completely agree. So we've learned more about you and the sort of history of Hellfire Caves, and all the exciting new developments that you're spearheading, really alongside your husband, James, and also your dad. But let's move on to the future, because, it's so interesting. All of these places really are now continuing to ever evolve in order to, who would have thought that the Hellfire Caves, certainly not Sir Francis probably when he was building them, would have thought that they'd now be a very popular tourist destination.
Well, I think he'd be proud because our main week of the year is Halloween.
Yeah.
So Halloween, particularly for locals, because I think locals love the caves because they've all come as children, and have those memories, but they maybe don't come every week. Do you see what I mean? It's more of you're coming every now and then, whereas Halloween is this thing we do every year. We do different age groups, so it gets scarier and scarier. Under 16s is not so scary, and then over 16s is scary, and it's simple. We just have loads of really good actors, and throughout the caves, and then the lights. This new lighting system means that the lights all turn off, so it's pitch black, and someone's going to scare you, but it's still terrifying because they're screaming at you, and you're not allowed to touch them, they're not allowed to touch you, but it's scary. You can hear people screaming in front of you, but you still scream.
I feel like as well when I think at your after party at your wedding, I definitely took the wrong left turn going down the caves at some point and ended up down a tunnel where there was like a figure, obviously it was a real figure, and it was like a plastic real figure, and I honestly remember being terrified out of my wits.
So imagine all lights off, Halloween's, it's properly spooky.
That is properly spooky.
So I think that's really, really fun that we do, and that's probably what locals know it most. I reckon if you ask someone in Marlow, what does the caves make you think of? They'll say Halloween.
Yeah, makes sense.
The team love it. It's the team at the caves are all, I would say they don't just do the job because it's a job. They're all properly passionate about the caves. They know all the history. They want every guest to have like the best experience, and they all love it. So it's special for them as well as the guests. Yeah.
And so Halloween's a really big feature, but then the caves are actually open a lot throughout the calendar year, aren't they?
Yeah. So
for sort of being able to visit.
Exactly. The idea behind Halloween and then now Christmas was to try and is more for employment, to try and employ the team the whole year round, whereas tourism is obviously much bigger in the summer. So yeah, Halloween is really going well. And then we've recently launched 2 years ago, Santa's Grotto. So that's been really sweet and perfect for really little ones. And that's kind of, it's more of an experience than just meeting Santa, and the elves can't find the post box. So they're all going searching down the caves with a little group trying to find the post box, and then they can't find Santa. So we tried to make it
really theatrical.
And I'd love to kind of build on that more. So that's, and then maybe one day we'll think of something to do in January. But at the moment we close in January, just because it's such a quiet time of year.
But then everyone can, but like outside of the sort of main seasons, you can just go and visit them and and make a trip down.
Exactly, throughout the whole year.
Yeah,
it's open 7 days a week, from Easter to Halloween.
Yeah,
basically.
Amazing. What are your kind of favourite things locally, like in Marlow? Are there any other sort of things
I
around the
mentioned Marlow.
area?
We love Marlow. Marlow.
Really, why?
Just a love. It's just a love. It's a town nearby. It's 10 minutes away. It's on the river. There's like loads of lovely things you can do on the river. It's very pretty, and then there's loads of nice restaurants. I think for families it's just a nice place to go.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking about this earlier, then there's Heritage X, because that they'll have a really good map on it where you'll be able to look up other historical buildings nearby that are also on Heritage X.
Yeah,
so
you could go and kind of add to
your trip. Exactly.
Yeah. That's very kind of you to say. So how long do people need if they're planning a trip to come down and see you at the Hellfire Caves? How long would you suggest they need to allow for?
Well, I think a nice amount of time to spend down there is an hour. But if you're interested in the paranormal, you might spend a lot longer. Like people might spend, because there's all the different ghosts and the feelings and they will want to read all of the facts and as you go down the kind of story.
Yeah.
So, I'd say an hour is a nice amount, but lots of people spend a lot longer. Wow. We've had some people even do like sleepovers, like YouTubers have come and done like sleepovers in the caves.
Oh my gosh, I would be so fascinated.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
But then if it's nice if you want to have a lunch at the Wall Garden and go for a walk, you spend a whole day basically.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So about an hour or so, depending on how interested you are in the paranormal.
Exactly, and how patient your children are.
Yeah, that's true. What do you hope for sort of the future of the estate? The caves, the Wall Garden.
Well, I think it may be easier talking about the caves than the Wall Garden.
Yes,
because they're more similar in terms of hospitality. I think particularly having a daughter now, I feel like experiences are the best thing you can give a child or you can give a relative, in terms of value for money and what you get out of it. So I'd love just to be able to really create more of these experiences, around the holidays, like Easter, like Christmas, like Halloween, but just generally throughout the whole year. I'd love to have an ice rink next year. That's my goal.
Really? That's really
I don't
fun.
know if we'll ever be Lapland. I'd like to make it something more affordable, but I'd love to create something, keep building on these experiences.
Yeah, because you believe in them
around
so
the
much.
sites, and making it particularly for families, because that's also the phase I'm in at the moment.
Yeah, it makes so much sense.
And my dad and James love the whole concept of experiences as well.
It's also, but I just think just this sort of reflecting on like more broadly, how these places. As you said, like Sir Francis was once this sort of great lord of leisure, or Sir Francis, but great man of leisure, and actually, these places are. They do have to so evolve, and they have evolved into, in large part, becoming destinations. And the families that, like your own, that are still kind of intact there, and it's the same with mine. Like they've become a business, and they've become fundamentally hospitality and tourism is now the mainstay. It's the bread and butter.
Which is so interesting because it's so intrinsically linked to why they first started as hospitality for oneself, and now they're hospitality for everybody. In terms of keeping it as a business and keeping it alive.
Yeah, I completely agree, and that's what's so cool, and it's also really fun. And I don't know about you, but I think for me, it's watching people go round something like, I imagine, the caves, or in Beaver when I was growing up. There's nothing cooler than watching someone go round and kind of be in some way, shape, or form inspired by or fascinated in something that it's just, you see it through their eyes, and it's really cool to see.
Totally. And I think sometimes if you see something the whole time, you forget quite how cool it is, and then you take someone down there who didn't know it was. Suddenly someone comes for a meeting, I'm like, oh, I can show you the caves because you're here.
Yeah.
And they're like, wow, I can't believe this is it.
Those caves really are so mind-blowing though, and it is so close to London. And I think It's just, yeah, I'm so grateful to be able to sort of share it with everyone, because it's honestly, they're a very unique experience to be able to go down those caves and just, you can feel on the walls, like the history that's down there and the conversations that have been had to some degree.
I know, who knows what actually happened.
I know, who knows? Part of me wishes there was a camera, like there were cameras down there way back then. Okay, but if you could say to future generations, long after we're gone, but like if you could say to future generations, like what would your advice be, or suggestions to future generations?
I think to be really proud of your heritage, and also feel really lucky that you know that there's such a clear indication of kind of where you're from and all the stories and everything. I think to feel really lucky about that, and again to keep enjoying the experiences, whether they're working there or not. You know, future generations, they might just like going there with their friends for Halloween, and they might not necessarily have any involvement in the management of it, but either way, just being proud and enjoying the experience, and keeping the experience alive for other families.
Thank you so much, Tor, for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.